I need a vacation. No more machines, no more automation, no more choking smog. The ability to stand on materials not fundamentally sourced from the shattered remains of my previous incarnations or the unwilling sacrifices of a million mobs. Just a nice, calming beachfront getaway. Look, see, they even have tiki torches here. And friendly land snakes. Friendly glitching land snakes, admittedly, but it's modded Minecraft, so we won't judge too harshly. This is great. Hello, friendly glitching land snake. Do you like hugs? Oh. Okay then. Geez, must have had a bad run-in with a secretary bird or something. Some people. Hey, folks of a feather, I just had a run-in with the rudest snake. You're not going to... Ow! I'm sorry, were they your buddy or something? They were the one who bit my head off. I do this to escape being henpecked. I'm not going to put up with it from you too. What is up with the locals here? Maybe I just got the wrong mod pack or something. I knew I should have clicked on Albuquerque. But what a ripoff. You should have heard the advertisements for this thing. It was all stuff like, this mod pack's unbeatable! It's a die-hard Minecrafter's final mod pack. Once you play it, you'll never be the same again. All that hype. And for what, exactly? This place has the worst cockroach infestation I've ever seen. As far as I can tell, the only thing to do around here is hot air balloon rides. The condos look like the management's last attempt at renovations was sometime around the start of the Common Era, and the only tolerable local I have run into around here hasn't said a word to me, and has been sunbathing long enough to turn into a raisin. I'm not seeing the appeal, gang. So yeah, this is officially the worst vacation destination ever. At least they have hammocks, though. That's pretty cool. Anyway, let's get started. It's RLCraft. For those of you unfamiliar enough to not know exactly what I mean by that, don't worry, you'll find out. The rules are pretty simple. Rule 1. Play on hardcore mode. Rule 2. No throwing the game. If I get a lousy start, I have to make it work as best I can, or die trying. Rule 3. Get a dragon ring. And this is only a rule because otherwise I could and would just circumvent the most interesting part of the game by nerd pulling up and summoning the final boss in about 30 seconds. And finally, Rule 4. Beat the final boss. Oh, and Rule 5. No cheating. Mostly. I say mostly only because I'm gonna end up making some config changes to improve my quality of life and to tone down a bunch of the graphical jank that this pack adds. You could argue that it might make the game less immersive and microscopically easier, but it also ensures that my footage doesn't look like I compress it with an elephant's backside before shipping, and should help avoid giving Strawman Timmy a seizure every time I spend more than 2.5 seconds existing in the general proximity of an Enderman, so, you know, trade-offs. Anyway, let's get started. World 0. And before you ask, yes, the world names are going to be the number of times I have died. I have never successfully done this, by the way. When I first tried this challenge on my own, it was in the triple digits before I even beat the Ender Dragon, and I gave up somewhere around World 200. I have gotten a lot better since then, so we will see. World 0 starts off fairly promising, though, insomuch as I'm only freezing to death. That is a good thing. I could just as easily have spawned in too deep of an ocean and drowned, in the middle of a dragon's nest and been eaten, in the middle of a pool of dangerous ghoul and died from acid, fire, freezing, poison, or all of the above, or just been stuck inside a block and unable to escape at all, because I have had all of those happen to me before. So, my standards are real low. Enterprising viewers will also note that I'm right-clicking on or sneaking over items to pick them up. This is an RLCraft thing. I could turn it off, but honestly I've learned to really appreciate it. It isn't always better than the default picking everything up automatically option, but once you get accustomed to it, it is far less annoying than it might appear. My first priority is finding a biome warm enough to not turn into a goose sickle. Temperature management is a thing in this game, and cold in particular is tricky to get around early on. Too hot can just be fixed by jumping in water. Too cold just kind of kills you. The icon for this effect is located in the center of my HUD. The circle in the middle is my current core temperature, and the outside bit is the environmental temperature. Thankfully, cold avoidance ends up not being so hard since there is a slightly warmer biome nearby. After grabbing some random rocks, sticks, and cracking a couple of flint open, I make a beeline over to it and set about the most important part of any new RLCraft install, which is fixing the jank config options it ships with. I will be keeping this run mostly vanilla out of respect for the no cheating rule, since if you know what you're doing, you can basically give yourself discount X-ray hacks just by borking the configs up. But I will defend, to the death, my right to actually see how much damage I've taken, and my right to actually see the game at all. TLDR, I set up First Aid HUD to always show my health in the bottom right of my screen, since the vanilla health bar is about as trustworthy as a Ouija board, and I place the entirety of enhanced visuals into a dumpster and light it on fire. Done. Now that the game is playable, let's start playing. RLCraft has a mod called No Tree Punching, which just forces you to do some extra steps before you can make tools. As a general rule, you are required to find gravel, get flint, right-click with a flint on certain kinds of blocks to get flint shards, craft those shards in with a stick from punching leaves, use the resulting knife to cut grass, braid the grass into string, use flint, sticks, and string to make an axe, fell a tree with the axe, place the logs from the tree, split the logs with the axe to get planks, make a crafting bench, use string, flint, and sticks to make a flint pickaxe, and use the flint pickaxe to get stone chunks. Or you can just loot tools from a dungeon chest or find a crafting table and skip this entire process. Oh, and breaking stone doesn't give you cobblestone, it gives you blobs of rock you have to recraft into cobblestone at a fairly substantial loss. So, have fun with that. As annoying as this may sound, some of the changes within this mod do have a practical use, and I will touch on those later. Also, there are a number of ways to skip most or all of the startup process so it isn't as bad as it seems. So, for the most part, it just adds a thematically appropriate starting loop to the game. Unless you have to do it 200 times because you keep dying, in which case it stops being thematically appropriate pretty quick and then instead just sucks. After this little process finishes up, I end up getting my standard starting kit put together. Pickaxe and axe, for obvious reasons, a stone shield, a stone spear, stone javelins, a furnace, and all the materials I need for repairing items and hoarding string. Before we go any further, I should probably talk about combat in this mod pack, because there is a lot of it, and if you don't know what you're doing, you are going to have a very bad time. For starters, natural health regeneration does not happen. Period. If you want to regenerate hearts, it has to come from consumables, enchantment effects, potion effects, or sleeping. Health is also divided amongst your body parts. Too much damage to your legs or arms gives you movement speed and mining speed debuffs. Too much damage to your chest and head inflicts you with a sudden case of unalive, and the damage overpenetrates. Armor is also balanced around this mechanic, which is why way higher armor values show up whenever I hover over a wearable bit of armor, but in effect I start with 3 hearts. For that reason, I tend to prefer using spears, javelins, and shields. RLCraft, for all of its supposed flaws, has an absolutely spanking hot combat system compared to basically every other Minecraft mod pack out there. There are a bunch of different kinds of weapons with their own advantages and disadvantages, and actual planning is required to use them all correctly, as opposed to the traditional Minecraft approach of grug make better stick. Big weapons give you crippling attack speed debuffs if you try and hold them with an item in your offhand, and are slower overall, but they reward you with higher damage values and a better weapon reach distance. Smaller weapons attack faster, and can be used with shields, which is basically required right now, but they have weaker overall damage. Some weapons, like javelins, can be thrown to do quite a lot of damage, but have limited ammo and make for very poor melee weapons. A lot of the options are terrible or just aren't balanced enough to make a proper build around, per se, but there is a lot of variety, and situational factors can actually motivate you to choose one weapon over the other, hence spears and javelins. Since I'm playing on hardcore, my goal right now is less stabby stab and more don't get stabby stabbed, and this means that I will definitely want a shield, which limits me to single-handed weapons. Of all of those, the spear is a solid compromise of attack speed, attack range, and damage, and is usually my go-to starting weapon. Javelins can then fill in the gap by giving me a high DPS ranged option. Of course, getting all these tools is not without risk. Mining ore, chopping wood, and even breaking grass all have a nasty habit of spawning mobs that strongly object to you doing those things and tend to make their objections known violently. And this is eventually the cause of my first death, because after a couple of close shaves, an overgrown flower stuck its head up, got a lucky hit in on a critical body part, and earned itself some new fertilizer. Compliments of me. World number 2, or 1, I suppose, is another fairly promising start. Except for the fact that I fat-fingered the creation menu and started it in creative mode. Let's try that again. World 1 is an absolutely miserable start that spawns me in at the bottom of the ocean. Thankfully, it happens to be a shallow ocean and there is land nearby. Less thankfully, that land nearby is a miry swampland that is very short on gravel, and I have to slog through the water for quite a bit before I can find flint and get started with the pre-stone crafting loop. I end up not making a whole lot of progress with that. See previous comment about this place being a miry swampland, but I do come across an environmental set piece that I can loot. Unlike a dungeon, which is basically just a slightly more drawn-out version of digging a grave and hopping in given my current loadout, this is a set piece and is no more dangerous than the rest of the game is. Set pieces oftentimes have chests of loot, but the real treasure here is a convenient source of wool, wood, and stone. Since you can craft wool and string into each other interchangeably in this mod pack, that, plus a little bit of looting, is enough to get me my starting kit. Of course, it's not without its own risks. At one point in my looting spree, some local fishwomen in my area tried to hit on me. Unfortunately for them, I'm more of a feathers kind of person, so after their failed attempt to lure me towards them, I installed earplugs and moved on with my life. I even found some iron in the set piece, which is great. What is not great is that I can't mine it because my mining skill is too low. Also not great is what happens when I forget to pause my game while taking notes and then die of hypothermia. Next world, please. World 2 spawns me underwater in the middle of a frozen snowy biome, which is pretty bad. Thankfully for me, I spawn right next to a tent set piece made out of wool, which I immediately loot and tear apart for raw materials. Crafting wool into string lets me skip some of the pre-stone crafting, and this is a speed boost that barely manages to save my life. This whole problem happened because gravel wouldn't drop a flint, by the way. For reasons that are now blatantly apparent, I am convinced that gravel goes out of its way to try and get me killed in this mod pack. Either way, after that rocky start, having a ready source of wool makes getting the rest of my kit together pretty easy. Thanks to a very friendly biome next door, I can complete the rest of it and secure a bunch of leather and food in the process from the cows and giant dinosaur-looking things called maca that live there. For the first time in this challenge, I now have weapons, armor, and access to healing items. I even found some iron. And by some iron, I actually mean no less than 3 iron-bearing set pieces. What I don't have, however, is mining levels. As I was saying earlier, before I was so rudely frozen to death, progression in RLCraft is gated behind experience. There are actually 2 mods that do this. Reskillable gates what you can interact with in the world. So for example, if I want to mine iron, I need to have at least 4 levels in mining. And there is a second mod called Level Up, which gives you a bunch of passive combat abilities that I'll touch on in a bit. Initially, this might seem annoying and kind of self-defeating, but it also is pretty necessary in terms of game rebalancing, since without it, people could just cheese a single high-level dungeon and have nearly endgame gear in an hour. For now, a combination of cooking, mining, and good old-fashioned murder is enough to get me my experience that I need. As with everything in this pack, wearing better armor and using better weapons requires more XP levels, which I don't have, and sadly I am very much out of ore to mine at the moment. This is where Level Up Reloaded comes in. XP from combat effectively just increases mob XP drops slightly, XP from mining gives you XP for mining ore, and XP from crafting gives you XP for crafting certain kinds of items. In most mod packs, the choice you pick does not matter at all, since all 3 are pretty terrible. But since this is hardcore RLCraft, the choice ends up being very important, and the only correct answer is to select XP from crafting. For the very simple reason that crafting is one of the very few things in this mod pack that is guaranteed to not spawn monsters that want to eat your face. Of course, not immediately killing you still does not make the mechanic good. The crafting XP passive in level up is really picky about what counts as crafting, given the risk of cheesing the mechanic for infinite levels, and it tends to be quite weak. As a general rule, the only recipes that craft effectively are tools, weapons, and armor, and even when successful, they will only give you a single point of experience. Naturally, since I'm me, I experimented with every craftable item I could realistically get in early game and found a few ways of making this utterly busted. Introducing Torch Meta. Rather than risk your life to steal experience from others, generate it yourself by crafting a torch, lighting it, because you have to light them in this mod pack, placing it, breaking it to quench it, and relighting it all over again. For some reason, this counts as crafting. No idea why. Since the only thing consumed here is a flint and steel, it is basically a way of turning iron ingots into XP, and I fully intend to milk it for all it's worth. In doing so, I can now wear iron armor. Great! This means that the average vanilla trash mob is no longer able to one-shot me. Some of the time. It's progress, at least. My next priorities are locating more iron and hunting for easy sources of experience. At this stage of the game, nearly anything is worth stealing, mining, smelting, or stabbing. The goal here is not speed, it's safety. So if it's boring, I'm just gonna edit it out in post. This results in a nice relaxing rest of the day, followed by a bunch of cooking and a quick nap to heal off what few injuries I sustained. I set out in the next morning looking for basically whatever. Whatever I can find quickly morphs into trying to explore the outskirts of a defiled biome, which is kind of a misnomer because they're actually pretty hospitable as RLCraft goes, and I stumble upon a vanilla-ish dungeon with a spider variant spawner. Dungeons, well, specifically mob spawners, are super dangerous for me to approach right now, mostly because there's like 3 different kinds of boss mob variant that can occur from any trash mob spawn, but I decide that this is worth the risk. Scuttlers are always the same size, and the design of the dungeon is such that they will always be trapped unless they have a teleporting mechanic. Lightning summoning mobs won't work underground, and pretty much everything else can just be outranged or avoided, so if I'm careful, this should be pretty free experience. This is where I counter my first Infernal. Infernal mobs have cool particle effects, a bigger health pool, and a bunch of passive effects associated with them. If you watch the first few videos of Gregtech New Horizons I did, you're probably familiar with most of them, but unlike this pack, this one doesn't remove any of the busted overpowered effects. This variant has sticky, poisonous, gravity, and rust. Gravity sucks me into the mob, rust wears down items I use to fight it, and both of those effects are pretty harmless. Poisonous poisons me when I hit the mob, which is annoying but not insurmountable, and sticky will make me drop whatever item I hit the mob with. This would be a problem if scuttlers could pick up weapons, but they can't, so it doesn't really matter. All in all, I decide that this is a pretty good matchup, so I eat some spare meat to get the absorption effect and stab it and all of its friends to sleep in like 30 seconds. Spawners don't last forever. Once they spawn a certain amount of mobs, they will destroy themselves. This is part of the anti-cheese mechanics of the game, and keeps you from just farming one super safe mob farm until you're at max level. It's sad, but fair. It does mean that breaking in and looting the dungeon is fairly trivial, though, because the only things of note here are a single spawner and a few spiders. The only loot of note in here is a single ingot of umbrium, which is fancy iron, a little bit of armor that I can smelt down into more umbrium, and a couple of black hearts, which are very interesting to me since they are a key crafting component to a passive life regeneration option. I hang on to both of them, smelt the useless armor down. Oh, armor and tool recycling is a thing, by the way. Take a quick nap to skip night, and am on my way again. Morning sees me stuck between a rock and a hard place. Literally. 2 rocks, spelt ROC, are outside my cave, and while I could go deeper into the cave right now, caving is basically the equivalent of putting up a giant eat me sign on your rear end in this game, so I will decline. After a little more mining sees me accidentally summoning an angry blue rock monster and nearly wetting myself in surprise, I decide to cut my losses and move on. I've already gotten what I wanted from this biome and then some. Some more wandering sees me come across another excellent find. A forest full of dense, woody trees. This isn't super useful yet, given that I am sadly lacking in iron for grinding out crafting levels, but I might want to come back here later. A little more time passes after that, and then the game tries to tempt me with a dungeon. I decline. My first dungeon was kind of a special case where I knew I was pretty safe. These things are spooky in hardcore mode, and there is a lot of nasty stuff that can spawn in them. Another lucky iron ore set piece sees me upgrading my gear again. I've collected enough XP now that I can start using iron tools and weapons, and getting those upgraded is a huge priority. For javelins and shields in particular, the improvement you get when upgrading from stone to iron is substantial. I also can, use it to make some pants, because having pants is important, right? I don't know. You monkeys seem to think having pants is important. I don't really see the appeal. With a lucky ore find right outside my set piece I set up camp in, I even have enough iron to start rolling for baubles. In addition to armor, you have 8 slots that can hold various special equipment. This equipment usually has some sort of passive effect or buff associated with it, and in addition to what most equipment can do, they will often also have different quality modifications associated that give further buffs. Some of the earliest craftable items that do this are tool belts and arrow quivers, which only need string, iron, arrows, and leather, so I make a few of those. Once I get a few more useful items, I will go into this mechanic a bit more, but for now I'm mostly just looking for quick max health increases, and I didn't get any, so it's whatever. With that little pit stop out of the way, I now have one goal. I want out of this biome. It is too cold. I do not like. Until, of course, I chance upon the skeleton of a Tier 5 ice dragon. This is phenomenally insane luck. The skull of a Tier 5 ice dragon is the limiting requirement for an endgame level bauble that is normally incredibly hard to make, given the rarity of Tier 5 ice dragons, and dragon bone in and of itself is valuable for weapon crafting. Of course, I have none of the other materials or levels that would be required, so it isn't super useful, but still, super lucky. I am still freezing, however. Another day of traveling sees me finally finding a biome that doesn't stick my feathers to my rear end, and also sees me about 40 iron richer, which means it's time for me to dump excess inventory and start up with the next phase of XP collection. Which, in true Goose fashion, involves massive crimes against Mother Nature. You see, torch crafting gives XP. Torch lighting also gives XP. Charcoal smelting also gives XP. I don't have a substantial amount of iron at the moment, but a stack of logs and a stack of charcoal blocks can make 32 stacks of torches, which means the combination of iron, wood, and charcoal represents a very potent concentration of potential levels. And it is time to cash in. Stage 1 is chopping as many trees as possible. In addition to being warmer, this biome has some of the biggest trees in the game, and I take full advantage. Fun fact, if you're too lazy to wait for your trees to fall down normally, trees always fall from the side you cut them, unless you're sneaking, in which case they fall towards you. This, combined with a block pretty high up on their trunk, collapses them almost immediately. I ended up not getting as much wood as I'd hoped from this biome, though, in large part because I'm currently sandwiched between no less than 3 dragons, 2 of which are roaming around aimlessly setting helpless villages on fire. I probably wasn't in any danger, but I saw no point risking my tail feathers for a bunch of logs when I will have other options for them in the future. There is plenty of tree out there, after all. There is no need to get greedy. As a consolation prize, I do find a bunch of armor stands that fell from a set piece that spawned in the sky, though. That's pretty common and makes for some nice bonus iron. To get this material processed, I end up setting up shop in a nice kind of cool rustic log cabin thing. A locked chest in here also gives me the ability to show off how lockpicking works. Basically, it's just a minigame where certain chests can sometimes spawn with locks, and you right-click on the lock with pick, slide the pick left or right, and press the up button to test tumblers. Remember which order the tumblers open, and eventually you're just going to get in. It's not super complicated. There are times where this is annoying, but it's also kind of a neat mechanic, so that's fine. The rest of the night is not super interesting, and then just involves me smelting down charcoal, crafting it into blocks, and looting a few healing items. After a little more careful wandering to avoid the roaming dragon hordes, and I end up coming across a village. Villages are great in RLCraft, because in addition to having a whole bunch of stuff to steal, they also often have waystones, which are blocks that let you teleport between them. More importantly to me, though, is that this village has a market set piece, which happens to have a large amount of wood and wood products in easily looted chests. This, combined with iron salvaged from random armor in the village and wool taken from structures, will net me a huge amount of experience, so I take the time to rip the place apart and turn it all into fiddly little crafting components. This is just shaping up to be another Gregtech New Horizons ripoff, isn't it? This process ends up taking the rest of the night, and is barely enough to get me to defense level 16, the level at which diamond shields and armor are unlocked. Of course, I currently don't have any diamonds, so it's time to solve that problem. The safest and most reliable way of getting diamonds without pushing up tulips instead is, sadly, pushing up rocks. Which is to say, mining them the normal way. Dungeons can easily supply you diamonds from loot, but dungeons, so no thank you. In addition to diamonds, I also require the Defiled Land variant called Scarlight to craft some rings that will grant passive HP regeneration, so mining is definitely on the table for a bit. Mining safely in RLCraft is kind of a trick. To start off, I have no coordinates to rely on, so I have to just measure the Y level by finding bedrock and then going up a bit. Secondly, it's really stinking dark down there. It's a good thing I just finished making 16 stacks of torches. Staying in darkness for too long spawns mobs that will eat you, obviously. But that isn't a problem for me, because if I'm in the dark, I can't see anything, so I need light anyway. Also, caves are extremely Goose, and I will not be entering them. I can mostly get away with strip mining if I'm careful, but caves are basically begging for trouble on bent knees. Also, whenever I mine ore, I have to be careful of angry stone boys and make sure that they can't reach me, because they will spawn randomly and try and clobber my face in. Fun times. Status update. No diamonds yet. Beginning to think they don't exist. What I do have are 18 heart shards, which when crafted together and consumed gives you a max health boost. Yes please, more of these. This place is also pants-wettingly terrifying and I want to go home. Status update. After a run-in with a very angry Rocky boy, whose fist broke on my shield and I stole, I found diamond ore on accident. Since I was smart and brought defilement powder with me, I turned 2 of it into Scarlight, mined the rest, and then hoofed it back to my temporary camp. These gems, with my black hearts and umbrium, give me a pretty spanking passive regeneration buff when both are worn. The rolls are both great and terrible. One is a max level attack speed roll, and the other is a decent attack speed roll and a terrible modifier that makes mining, moving, and attacking slower. They're both still worth wearing, though. Some more mining later, and I have enough diamond to start upgrading. My first tasks are, in order, unlocking mining 16, crafting a diamond pickaxe, getting an enchanting table, and stacking as many enchantments on a diamond helmet as I can. All of this requires XP, though, which I am sadly a little bit out of. No worries, for this we have engineering. Through the power of some creative water placement and slab delivery, I can design a system that will quickly let me place and break lit torches, allowing me to recycle them back into their unlit variety and conserve torches while I burn through my iron reserves. Is it agonizingly boring? Yes. Does it do the job? Absolutely. And in no time at all, that was a lie, it took forever, I have a diamond pickaxe that I can actually use. Naturally, it has the worst possible roll in the game, but it's made out of diamond, so it still does the job. Obsidian can fairly easily, albeit slowly, sourced from a lava pool nearby, though I do choose to bring lava to water with buckets. Lava spawns dangerous mobs that I want nothing to do with. After that, I get an enchantment table, craft my helmet, and get another terrible roll. Goody. I can re-roll these, but doing so requires diamonds that I don't have, so I slam the lousy helm on my head and get back to work. After securing some more diamonds and some more lava, I have the resources I need to make a tool forge and a bauble forge. These are basically used to re-roll the two different kinds of modifiers that you can get on equipment. The tool forge modifies quality modifiers using materials similar to what the item was crafted with, and the bauble forge re-rolls effect modifiers using experience. Some items have both kinds of modifier, some only have one, and some none at all. So remembering which is something of an art form. Most critically for me, though, is that this lets me drop the 10% speed debuff on the helm and the 5% speed debuff on my shield. I also slap some low-quality protection enchantments on my full kit, as even weak protection enchantments add a bunch of survivability. Stacking those up is going to be a priority once I have the resources to do so, but for now it's back to mining. Finding the last few diamonds I need takes an eternity, but I do it, and soon after I am the proud owner of a Protection 1 diamond chestplate, and after that I start packing up. I could, in principle, stay down here and stack up better armor and upgrades, but I'm running low on wood and even lower on patience, and I only have so much time in the day. Birds do not belong underground. After tunneling my way to the surface and very nearly becoming a dragon's lunch, I end up back on the road again. My goal right now is twofold. I need a big forest, sans dragon, and I need more diamond. This means that it's time to start exploring. It turns out that Forest Sans Dragon is the more complicated of the two to source, but I do fairly quickly stumble across a couple of excellent set pieces to loot. This tower set piece is basically just free money, because it happens to have quite a lot of armor stands fully stocked up inside of it, and one of those contains a full set of diamond armor. Yoink. The rest of the tower is largely unremarkable. It does have an anvil, a diamond, emerald, iron, and 2 gold blocks, and a bunch of redstone, but I mostly just look at the set piece's free gear and some raw materials. Rather than smelt down the redundant diamond armor, I also use this as an opportunity to get protection to chestplate and helms. The diamond block gets turned into a shield, and after a few unlucky rolls, everything is enchanted as best as I am able. This was an excellent find. More interesting to me, though, is this thing's position relative to a number of other dungeons. Dungeon looting is an exercise in inventory management at the best of times, and I really don't have any space to spare. With some low-level enchanted diamond equipment, I'm getting to the point where some early dungeon cheese might not see me adding my body to the dungeon's foundation, so my tentative plan is to try and crack some of these things open. In the next episode, that is, since I'm out of time for this one. I hope you enjoyed. If I understand the mechanic correctly, doing all of the channel supporty things down below gives you experience. Well, an experience of pushing buttons. It probably is not redeemable for passive combat bonuses, though, which is kind of lame. You should get on that, YouTube. And, as always, thank you for your time.